I know, right?
Normally it slows down.
Meeting will come to order at 5:10 p.m. 5:05. If I had quadruple focus, I could see that. Would you please take the roll?
I will. Dr. Atassi. Amy Barney.
Here.
Hal Christensen.
Here.
Marsha Cox.
Here.
Pat Rooney. And Julie Sasteen.
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and then we stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Item 4 is call to the public. Do we have any requests for a call to the public?
Let me just do a quick double check and make sure there wasn't anything back there that I missed. No, Madam Chair, we're good.
Item 5 is discussion and possible action regarding legal counsel request for proposal. Do you have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve Action 5, discussion and possible action regarding legal counsel.
Second.
Second.
Discussion? Which hat would you like to put on?
Madam Chair, would you like me to give you a little background on this?
Yes,
before
would you
take
please?
the vote?
I had a
Absolutely.
chance, I don't know if everyone else did, but I think you sent us the information on, I think you sent out a total of 5 requests for proposals?
Correct. We sent out a total of 5. We had 2 responses that came back in. We didn't hear anything from the others at all in terms of why they chose not to respond. I did provide all of you with a link to those documents. As you know, they were quite voluminous. I'm sure you all read them cover to cover. But in the end, you have 2 firms here, either one of which can provide the services that the district is requesting in terms of legal counsel, or excuse me, that the trust is requesting in terms of legal counsel. Our recommendation is to hire Jones, Skelton, and Hockley. As you know, you've been working with Mike Hensley, both as an interim attorney for the trust, and in addition, he's been doing some investigative work on behalf of the trust. So he's very familiar with your operations. He would not have to come up to speed. In addition, their rates were lower. His response was the one that was 220 pages. He obviously demonstrated in the attachments his ability to provide all of the services that were requested. And as a result, we are recommending award of a contract to Jones, Skelton, and Hockley. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think the thing that I noticed more than, and I did not read all of the 228 pages, and that was mainly because a lot of what Mr. Hensley's firm offered us were copies or examples of different trust documents that he had actually created, which you guys others as well, and different legal decisions that he had been made part of. But what I did notice, comparing the 2, was that Gus Rosenfeld, their specialty seems to be more of education law, school district representations, business, corporate law, things that more almost felt to me like something that like a district attorney, like a TSCA kind of an attorney would do, and Mr. Hensley's firm seemed more along the lines of like EBT trust laws, health insurance laws, legal health matters, things that, open meeting law, the things that, reviewing insurance contracts and things like that. And that's what I was more impressed with. And also the fact that he also provided us with examples of his fiduciary liability training that he does, and examples of different documents that he has provided to other trusts similar to ours. So that was what impressed me with his firm.
So you have a motion on the floor. Did you want me to do a roll call vote?
So we have a motion to approve Mr. Hensley.
I believe that's what you asked for at the beginning.
No, there was a
No, it's
motion.
just a
There was a
motion
motion
to
to
motion to
discuss.
discuss.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we approve the JSH
Yes.
as our attorney.
I'll second.
Sorry, we're in those two hats again. Okay. Dr. Atasi, Amy Barney,
Yes.
Hal Christensen,
Yes.
Marcia Cox,
Yes.
and Julie Sessi,
Yes.
and it passed unanimously.
And at this time, I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session.
And Madam Chair, for point of clarification, the executive session is for two things. One is for legal advice for the trustees related to the update of the end-to-end review, and the second item is for contract negotiations relative to the Cerner Clinic contract.
Second.
Okay, so back to this. Amy Barney,
Yes.
Hal Christensen,
Yes.
Marcia Cox.
Yes.
Julie Sessi.
Yes.
There you go.
Laughing to him if you want.
The EBT's back in session at 6:11, according to Mr. Christensen, because I can't read the clock. So we need to call
No,
for we're out of
okay.
executive session.
Now we're just going to do our presentation.
Go ahead and proceed, Madam Chair.
So the next item on the agenda is item number 6, update on end-to-end plan review. Do we have a motion to review the update on end-to-end review?
So moved.
Second.
Let's vote. Do we need a vote or not?
We're doing the who. She can read her handwriting, I can't read.
That's true.
We don't need a vote. Go ahead.
Okay. Madam Chair, I'm going to stand and just look over here. So for the edification of the trustees, this is an update to the end-to-end review. When ECA was hired back in October, one of our contractual items in our scope of services that we would provide an end-to-end review of what we saw as major issues that the trust was dealing with, noting that it was a breathing document. So as we moved forward, things would come in and drop off. So what this is a status check on those items that were uncovered, where they are today, and then it's actually going to roll into a degree for the following item on the operations of the clinic. And for the record, we've previously been in negotiations with the Cerner Clinic, and Friday we received the counter offer from them. So what I've done is updated this presentation to include information on that counter offer. Okay. All right, so background again, our company ECA was retained in October. Jamie Schulenberg, our senior account manager, and I have been working on it since that time. The end-to-end review is included in there. We issued that initial report on December 6th, and today brings everybody up to speed on where we are. Large number of issues with the trust, and we're using the then and now format related to its finances. So one of the first challenges we faced and the trustees faced that as of the time that we took over, there was no one place you could go to that bought in all of the revenue and expense data into a single location. So what we wound up doing is basically recompiling from all of the different data sources what we could get on how the trust had operated for the preceding 3 or 4 years. Some of the data points were also missing, significant data points based on some segregation. So a good example of one as a material item was that the prescription drug claims, which run over $600,000 a year, were not included in the financial reporting. What was happening is they were being debited out of the trust's checkbook, but not actually reported back to the trustees. So again, fairly significant numbers. Same thing with dental. There was just a gross number. It wasn't breaking out the lease expenses from the claims. There was not an adopted budget that we could find, so we could not see how the trust was running relative to a budget. Was it running over? Was it running under? And then what had happened internal to the district is that a couple of years before, what had started out as a significant audit finding from the external auditor had noted in particular that the trust's finances were not being well managed or well reported. So then the trust at that time wound up bringing in a local CPA to help do some of the reporting. So that was really kind of the big, I think the first exposure that the district had, was aware that there were some issues with the financial management. So that's what it was then. Now all of that information is compiled into a single report from a fiduciary perspective. We have the revenue, all the expenses, every item is broken out. And it is against an adopted budget. So those reports are emailed to the trustees at the end of every month. Consistently, once we close the month, about the middle of the following month, they get the actual report. And then quarterly, they go through the detail at the meetings. So fairly significant change. I would say very significant material change in how the reporting is being done. Rate setting was a big mystery. There is a dispute. The consultant said that the rates were set by the actuary provided by the third-party claims administrator, Gilsbar. Gilsbar said we never did that and pointed to their contract, which made no provision for providing actuarial services. We could never get the two to agree. So the rates were not set actuarially as near as we could tell. We also could not tell if all of the costs were included. We think they were not, because when we got done and actually did adopt ultimate budget, you'll see later on in the presentation, there was about a 7.5% for the current year, about a 7.5% short funding. So we know from the declining balance on the cash reserves that however the rates were set, they were not covering the operations, the cost of operating the trust. And you'll see again the slide that you could actually see the fairly rapid progression through the end of the 2016 year in terms of the cash assets of the trust. Now the rates are actuarially set. The trust has its own independent actuary, Chiron Group, out of the San Diego office. And every one of the expenses are included in there. We went into the current year recognizing that based on the actuarial projections, which are the variable, the claims costs, but also loading in all the fixed costs, that we were projected to lose $472,000. That can be low, that can be high, it just really depends on how the claims run for the year. The trust is small enough that 1 or 2 fairly expensive cases of breast cancer, a car wreck, something like that, can materially shift the numbers, but that was the known expected short funding for the current year. Okay, this graph shows the decline in the fund balance, and this is one of the ones that we were looking for. If you look at the blue line, it's the actual decline. So from the 14-15 year going down to the 16, the trust was simply declining. Somewhere in there around in 16, the district recognized what was happening and went to significantly increase the rates. That resulted in essentially staff walkouts when the funding was set where it needed to be to fund it. The district worked internally to absorb some of those additional costs, and you can see that they were successful. But there's a combination of things going on here. The brown line reflects where the results would have been but for the district infusing over $2 million additionally beyond the rates into the trust. This one has a second element to it, which is that I believe it's 3 of these 4 deposits. There's a 600, a 1.72, and a $450,000 deposit. I think there might be, those are annualizers. Actually, these are broken into a total of 4. The district had a separate account which had a label on it, which was the retiree account, because the district provides retiree benefits. And the thinking appears to have been that by labeling it as a retiree account, if the district transferred some of these funds in there, that would offset a projected $11 million liability for the retirees. It doesn't work that way. So the actuary has gotten into this previously, but in essence, for that to actually work as an offset, the money literally has to be lockboxed. It can be used for nothing else, it cannot be accessible. What it really operated as was a fund balance, which would be the natural thing for a trust like this. So in essence, in terms of reducing the retiree liabilities, it had 0 effect, but it had a significant effect on helping the district arrest that decline in the current benefit structure for the plan. So you can actually see with that additional funding over the last couple of years, it's stabilized. The thing to keep in mind with this account, or with this trust, is it is small. So it is highly volatile based on its size. And that's not unique to the district. It's just unique to any employer of this size. Okay, so this is in the presentation. We can give you copies of it. But in essence, what this thing does at the lower right, it shows the projected $472,000 funding deficit for the current year. And what it also does is compare where the funding should have been versus what was adopted. And in essence, what was adopted is what the district could afford. This is the actual budget, and it shows by line. This is the breakout. When we talked about a consolidated budget, it's color-coded. We use it internally, but when you look at the yellow lines, all that yellow, those individual items add up to the medical rate. The green ones add up to the dental. The blue ones add up to the vision, and something else in there for life insurance. So they all basically compile. But this was the first time that we could see where all of the expenses and revenue had actually been broken into a single document that you could then measure against. This is boring until it's not, but this then becomes the measure of how you measure how the trust performs against the budget. One of the more significant numbers for us in here was this. Okay, and this is the percentage of the budget that is paying claims, and it's about 72%. This is actually the lowest of all of our clients. Traditionally, this one will be, that figure in a normal account will be somewhere about 85 to 88%. So, and what this really reflects is the additional cost of operating the clinic. So that's the significant difference between this account and all of the other ones. So we would expect this to be about 15 points higher, 14, 15 points higher in terms of what percentage of it was dedicated to claims. Okay, other significant issues, just to kind of walk through these. Shortly after our firm was retained, the existing investment firm backed out. It was just mid-October. We replaced them with Wells Fargo for banking and Claremont Capital for investment services. One that is not yet done but will come in, to our knowledge, the trust has never calculated what's called IBNP, or incurred but not paid liabilities. And what this is a significant issue from an accounting and an audit perspective. This is an estimate of the dollar value of claims that are outstanding against that cash balance. So the services have been provided, but the bills haven't cleared the checking account yet. Okay, so this one actually will reduce the cash position of the trust because you have to recognize those liabilities. So this is a trust liability. This next one has not yet been published. It's being recalculated as we speak. But the district has a closed class of retirees. The GASB stands for Governmental Accounting Standards Boards, and they issue pronouncements on how you book liabilities. They have changed their pronouncement from GASB 45 to a more restrictive application of GASB 75. The significance of this, beyond all the letters, is that we believe, we're questioning it, what we believe is that the underfunded premium figures were used to calculate the liabilities. So we believe they understated the liability at $11.7 million. We'll have a better handle on this hopefully in the next couple of weeks. The last valuation was as of 2015, and Mike, the next one is as of 2017, correct? Okay. So this one, from the district's perspective, will be significant because the liability for this does not rest with the trust, it rests with the district. So we'll be getting an update on this one. Okay. And I should point out, we're speculating, because the numbers we have seen have been the district's prior historic premiums. We don't know how they were calculated. We're assuming those understated premiums were provided to the actuaries to do this calculation. We could be wrong. Some other ones on the management controls then versus now. Long and the short of the trust did not follow the open meeting law. So the meetings until 2016 were held without ever being posted for the public to attend, without following the open meeting law in terms of any of the requirements of it. I get into that with the contracts later. Well, I'm not to do it now. In essence, what that did is it meant that every contract that had been awarded through the trust was void, legally void. Okay, so we'll get into. We're in the process now. Most of them, all but 5, have been approved correctly and are valid and enforceable. We're still negotiating the last 5 to get them into place. There was no trustee education. This is a significant issue, basically, but because trustees are fiduciaries, they have fiduciary liability. The trustees were not educated. There's no record of trustees ever having been provided fiduciary liability or open meeting law training or even HIPAA for confidentiality of records. It may have been done. The trust has existed for 30 years. We have no record of it in the documents we have seen. Okay. Again, the vendor contracts, they were not, some of this is bureaucratic. I always say it's boring until it's not. They were not aligned with the plan year, so they were coming and going at different times, not lining up with either a fiscal or a calendar year. Some did, some did not. A good example, the Cerner contract, also the lease on the clinic, but also the life insurance contract, even some of the vendor contracts, they were just kind of all over the place. There's also no clear process of drafting, review, approval, signatures. We had contracts signed by people who did not hold the titles they signed with. They were just titles that were not applicable. They were not updated, so we had contracts that went back 10 years with attachments that did not jive. They're not in a good place. That's all then. Now everything is done as we're doing tonight. All of the meetings are posted in accordance with the open meeting law. The trustee packets are sent out a week ahead of time. After tonight, with the retention of counsel, we'll be setting up training for the trustees with fiduciary liability, HIPAA conflict, and then basically anything else that they want to have done, but to be done. If you want the trustees, because of the fiduciary liability operating under that umbrella, the protections that operating under counsel, advice of counsel give them. Vendor contracts, again, we're getting now, the ones that have been approved are all done with the fiscal year. They're aligned, they're approved in public meetings. They've been reviewed by the attorney first, approved as to form, making sure that they are as favorable as is reasonable for the trust, and then ultimately signed by whoever holds the chair title as of that time. Some other significant management and operational issues that were uncovered and that kind of going forward we'll get into. Again, as near as we can tell, we have no record that there was ever a fiduciary liability policy of insurance placed. That's significant because the district's policies specifically exclude any liability associated with the trust. So in essence, what we have, or what we had, this has since been placed, is that the fiduciaries are operating in a position of exposure. And frankly, likewise the district, because one of them was going to get sued if anything went wrong. Okay, and there was no place to turn to get coverage. So we did get a policy in place for May. We did an extended length policy working with the district's broker that actually went from sometime in May all the way through June of next year. A significant one from the district's financial perspective of the trusts. There's a policy out there called a stop loss policy. Basically, the district pays the first, Jamie, $150? $130,000 per belly button per year. Every man, woman, and child, the district pays the first $130,000. Above that is a stop loss policy. The drug cost was excluded from that policy. We have not encountered that before. We did inquire as to why, and the response was, well, the district's costs have been stable over the last 20 years. What that misses is the drug costs have not. Okay, so the absence of that coverage had a direct cost to the district last year ending June 30 of over $313,000 that would otherwise have been reimbursed. We added that coverage to the policy, and the premium cost differential was $26,600. So it's about 15 1/15 the cost of the loss. The problem with this, frankly, is now the horse is out of the barn, so the issues that led to that loss are essentially locked in now, when we're not able to get that covered. So this is a liability that will continue to hit the trust for the next coming years. New ones will be covered by the policy. Communications with the trustees, then, again, past tense, everything was going through personal email accounts. Now all the trustees have been established with district email accounts, the reason being open meeting law. The basic premise is that the public's business should be conducted in public. It gets to where if we do get a public meeting documents request, they can get them all of the relevant things from the district server. Okay. All right. All that's a lot, right? But the takeaway message is there was a lot of issues out there. Been very substantial progress made since October, working with the trustees. And we said at the time we thought it would be about 18 months, and that will still hold. So we're still thinking by the time we get through these other items we're going to walk into, it'll be about 18 months to get it back to where all the administrative items are handled and it's back on a solid financial footing, barring some cataclysmic flu epidemic or something like that hits. Okay, so major issues going forward. Financing, as we said before, starting as of today, we have a $472,000 projected deficit in the current year. Could be higher, could be lower, just depends on how the claims run. We're working with the district and the accountant that's been retained by the district and our own staff, we have a CPA on staff as well, to move to accrual-based accounting instead of cash. This more accurately reflects all the liabilities the trust has. The actuary is working with district staff on that GASB liability. We're also going to be publishing the IBNP for June 30th. And then internally, we'll be working with district business office staff to implement a reconciliation process. And again, one of the boring things until they're not, but this is basically sitting down to make sure you run an alpha list off of the claims administration, you run an alpha list off payroll, and make sure that people are correctly paying their respective portions for each of the tiers in the employee independent. Sounds boring, but if you mess that up on the reinsurance and you have people incorrectly classed, the reinsurance will not respond and the district is 100% liable. So if you take a kid who steps and gets run through the propellers on a boat on the lake and survives it, you get a $400,000 or $500,000, $600,000 claim. If they're incorrectly classified, there's no reinsurance for them. Okay, and being Havasu, right, and being these weekends, that's not far-fetched. Okay, so this reconciliation process is dull until it's not, and we'll work with district staff on that. These are the 5 contracts, 6 contracts that are technically still void. These are all major players in the cost operation of the district's plan. We are working with council and with these guys to get their contracts to a point where we can get them signed and get them in place. Again, significance is liability issues. Okay, we're spending public funds to pay people whose contracts are void. Okay. Okay, Cerner Clinic, we're going to get into an update after this. So prior to this, the Cerner Clinic, the question for the clinic has been, do you keep it, do you close it, how do you do it? Because the contract was void, we negotiated it through the districts, through the trust council, a 60-day extension, which was actually put on the table by Cerner, so that we had until the last day of August to decide whether to keep it open. There, we went back to them and gave them some figures, which I'll go into in a minute, and said, hey, here's what the cost of a visit is out in the community, here's what the cost is for a visit at the clinic. We need to get the delta between those two numbers closed. If we're able to successfully renegotiate that and come back to the trustees will make a decision whether or not to keep the clinic. If we cannot do that, then it was understood, it's written into the agreement, that 831 agreement, that the clinic would close on December 31st. That would put on us and the trust to redesign the benefits for the trust starting in January. So what we did, ECA did, is we've been running a parallel process. We've been doing the negotiations with Cerner. We got their most recent offer on Friday. But in a parallel universe, and I'll walk through this in more detail, we've had to get the actuary pricing a bunch of benefit options. So if we do that, what do we have to do? The significance of this is the entire benefit structure for the trust is built around that clinic. So what happens is if you go anywhere but that clinic, the out-of-pocket expense for the member, the employee, the spouse, the child, is significantly higher than would be without the clinic. So if you shut the clinic, we first have to get rid of the deficit, but then redistribute the dollars to make it a more realistic plan in the overall, and that's the complexity. So this was where my presentation ended until this morning, because we got the numbers from Cerner on Friday. The actuary re-crunched them over the weekend. So here's roughly where we sit today. So from the budget's perspective, there's about 663, these are rough figures, we have about $663,000 budgeted for the 18-19 year for the running of the clinic, and then for the operational expenses we have another $86,000 in there. That the operational side includes the rent, the utilities, the insurance, all that type of stuff. In the cost per visit calculation, based on data supplied by Cerner, the current, and Gilsbar, in the community, if you will, we're using the term community visit. So if you go to Blue Cross, the all-in cost without splitting it for a visit is about $130 for a primary care visit. The clinic today, based on the current structure, that figure, the comparable figure is about $244 a visit. So we've got $114 delta in here. So we have revised quotes, and actually that first one you can get rid of, that revised the 201 figure, because that's the most recent one is below it. And we asked them to get to a figure of $130 per visitor, get close to that. And so what they basically came back with is to reduce the staffing and to reduce the number of hours per week. And depending on how that shifted the visits, the range came in at 178 to 225. The 178 figure assumes that every visit that was done by 2 is done by 1, except the Saturday visit. So they eliminated all the Saturday visits because that offer assumed that Saturday would be closed. So it's a guess on where it would be. Our belief is it would wind up somewhere still in the range of the 200, closer to the 200 figure. And to maintain the clinic, to do that, the trust would have to sign a new 3-year agreement. Okay. So this is their most recent offer as of Friday. All right. So the discussion points that we have had in broad strokes have been, to close that delta. The Cerner position is essentially that their philosophy was never to compete against the community cost. Period. They're a primary care structure. Their intent is to spend more time with individuals seeking care. So whereas a local visit might be 15 minutes, there's going to be an hour. So there's a philosophical difference in there that drives the cost. Again, that's Cerner's side. From the trust perspective, the benefits today are completely centered around that clinic. So if you use the clinic, primary care costs are low to the beneficiary, right? And so are scripts that are dispensed there. If you go outside, it reverses. They're higher. The difficulty of this one is, by definition, a clinic only can provide a limited scope of services. Right? You have NPs, which are fine, but it's much limited. You don't have specialists, say, for example, in cardiology, endocrinology, in OB-GYN, or family medical practitioners. Just a nature of the licensing issue. So then we get down to, you got to find that balance. If the clinic were to go away, you have to restructure the benefit plan to recognize and reflect the fact that it's no longer built around a clinic. So what we did, or where we're at now, is our starting point is we're using as gross annualized figures that $685,000 in operating costs is what it takes to run that clinic. Significantly, we're assuming no reduction in terms of medical costs. We're figuring everything that's in that clinic is going to shoot over to the Blue Cross. We are aware there's a price differential. Theoretically, it's lower. We've chosen the more conservative route and just assume the dollars are going to go across at 100%. Of that $685,000, we have to close the existing funding gap of $472,000 before we can even get to benefits, which leaves roughly $213,000 to redistribute some portion of that to lower the out-of-pocket costs for the participants. Because this would be a mid-year change, we're doing a 2-step process, which is to just modify the existing benefit plan, if this comes to pass, for the period January 1 to June 30. And then in July, and I'll get into the detail here in just a second, would be a second permanent structure going forward. And what it looks like now, today the deductible on the plan. These are the options we're pricing. So today the deductible is $2,500 for a single, $5,000 for a family. We have the actuary pricing out 4 different options. If you look, all of them are significantly lower. So $500, $1,500, $7,500, $2,250, $1,000, $3,000, $1,500, $4,500 on the deductible. This is all in the gold plan. And then to reduce the out-of-pocket max from its current $6,500, $13,000 to each of these 4 options. Okay? And I'll go through it and I'll kind of explain the process. On the office visit copay, from $55 for everybody to $25 for the primary, $50 for the specialists versus $30, $60, and $50, $75. We're assuming OB-GYN would be in the primary care. And then on the chiropractic, we would keep it at the specialist level with the 30 visit limit and then $100 maximum payable on there. Adding a component called teledoc, and I want to stress all of these are options. It'll be a variation. Teledoc is a phone-based kind of an urgent care type thing. The analogy I use is if it's something to be treated with one of the Cillins, penicillin, amoxicillin, pink eye, UTIs, that type of thing. It's a 24/7, 365 benefit that you can use your phone with, and they can prescribe other than controlled. So we have that as pricing that without a copay. Increasing the urgent care because from 55 to 75 based on the teledoc presence, and then reducing the x-rays and deductibles for freestanding lab and x-ray, and distinguishing that from a hospital. So if you're freestanding, it'll be lower, it'll be a copay based. If you go to the hospital, any hospital, it would be deductible co-insurance. Changing sterilization from 80% after the deductible to no cost sharing for the member. Basically, it's cheaper to do sterilization than it is to have babies. And then changing the co-pays on the mail order down to these levels again, pretty much reductions. Then in July of 19, so those would be the changes with the existing plan, just kind of modifying the existing structure. But then in July of 2019, we would prefer to price out eliminating the silver plan completely, getting rid of the case management penalty, eliminating the requirement that the only place you can get a mammography is at mom, and then having a second plan option, which would be a high deductible health plan with the health savings account at these different levels. Okay, so that's just what would happen.
That gold plan too, or not?
Say that again.
You said implement a silver plan, but also
No, eliminate the silver plan. So you have the gold plan
Sorry.
would be alongside a high deductible.
Add the high deductible, but still have the gold as an option.
Okay, yeah, and either or. Yep.
Okay.
So the question, just to clarify, the question was, would the gold still be there? Yeah. So it'd be a fork in the road. The employee would have an option to pick between essentially a copay and deductible plan and a qualified high deductible health plan with an HSA.
Okay, right now, just because I'm just an employee, I'm trying to get this. So then in July then, next year, we would choose or whenever we pick it, we pick which one we want. Is it still going to be at no cost for the employee, or would it be one is going to cost you and one is not?
We don't know yet. We haven't gotten there because we don't have the pricing back. So that's where we're going to get into that here. We have all we got because we just got Cerner's costs on Friday. We've sent the information to the actuary, but we didn't have the baseline cost comparison that we need to then run those premium comparisons. So our target right now is to get the pricing back from the actuary on all of those options, and then go through the selection process on September 6th. Okay. So that's a lot. So the administrative considerations we have right now is that regardless of what happens with these, all of those remaining vendor contracts are void. We're doing this at the same time. We have 6 contracts that we're continuing to negotiate. If we close the clinic on 12/31 of 2019, we have to cut an agreement with Cerner on how to conduct that wind down. We know we need to go out to do employee education meetings on site to answer questions. We've already done a couple of these. So we go out, we want to make sure that employees are not...
18 or 19?
18,
It's
right?
18.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, 18. Great typo, thank you. Supposed to be 18. I've been through peer review and got missed about 4 times. We have to go out and do employee education and communication because basically we don't want rumor mill controlling. So get out there, put the numbers out, give the reality. Gilsbar needs significant time to reprogram their system to get the changes in We have to renegotiate the stop-loss contract because of the changes in the liabilities, and then by law, we have to conduct another open enrollment. So there are major, major considerations in order to get this done in an orderly fashion. This is all an if the clinic was to close. Questions? That's a lot. Madam Chair, just for the trust, I mean, I think the takeaway message, frankly, is, as expected, there's a lot on the plate. To reassure the trustees, I would say there's actually been quite a bit of progress made so far in getting things done. Still a lot of work to do, still a lot of uncertainty in terms of what's going to happen with the clinic.
I have a question. We have a contract for the clinic facility, I think, for another year. How will that be addressed?
Good question. So we have a lease agreement through March of 2020 on the clinic building itself. Our cost calculations are assuming that we would pay that liability out through the end of the contract unless the owner subsequently decided to rent it to somebody else. So the presumption is that the trust would honor that contract all the way through the end, including maintaining all the things that would be required to keep the building habitable along the way.
One thing I want to point out, and this is just because it's part of what my industry is on page 20, we're talking about the teledoc, because I know that that's one thing that a lot of our staff and employees are concerned about, being able to get urgent care and whatnot. And in the state of Arizona, you can actually have a new patient visit through telemedicine. So it's not like it has to be an established patient, that kind of a thing. So that is something that, there's only 3 or 4 states that actually allow that. And so that is something that's kind of a nice additive that, I mean, for me, it makes me feel better because I know that, that might be something that if, for some reason you can't get in to a doctor right away and you do need to, you need to see somebody and you haven't found a doctor yet, that is something that I think is a little more reassuring. And then teledoc, and there's a couple of them, but teledoc is very widely known, and it doesn't have to be a physician here in town. It can be any provider that's licensed to do business via telemedicine, in the state of Arizona. I think that's a nice add-on.
I got something to say on that. The telemedicine is actually a great thing because it takes somebody who's got any kind of minor illness, pink eye, sore throat, whatever. They can be treated like within a half hour of the time they make the call. Whereas under the standard way, especially if we don't have the clinic, you could be waiting quite a while, and it's frustrating, it takes time and so forth. So I think the telemedicine, I've seen many, many people use it.
And they don't have to get out of bed.
Just in their jammies.
They can stay in their pajamas.
Nicole has a question.
Yes.
Madam Chair, Mr. Collins, on the other significant financial issues, you'd mentioned that the GASB 75 would be done in the next couple of weeks. But when you talked about the incurred but not reported liabilities, I'm just wondering, do we have a total for the fiscal year ending 18? And for the incurred but not reported for the last fiscal year? Do we have an idea of what that was?
We don't have that yet.
Okay.
I'm actually preparing the materials, the data that Mike Shunning needs in order to do that calculation, and it's done after the fiscal year ends.
Okay.
So I'm doing it now for the
Okay.
6/30/18, and then what we do is we actually update the financial reporting that we do to show what that liability is so that you see how that impacts your bank balance.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, if it is any information.
I have another question.
Sure.
I've heard from a few doctors who would like to have some of our business. If we had doctors who were willing to accept what we had for walk-in visits, if they did that, is that something we could maybe offer? I guess we're already offering it either way, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm understanding the
I
question.
mean, if you like, let's say there's a doctor in town who wanted to contract with us to be able to see people on an immediate basis or longer term. Is that something that could be entered into?
The district contracts through Blue Cross, so if the doctor is contracted with Blue Cross, they're already in the system. And I'm trying to think, I don't know of any that are not contracted with Blue Cross in town. I could be wrong on that, but I think they all are.
I think what you're talking about is like a unique contract that they wanted to be like a
Provider, or
like
a walk-in.
a district provider, you know, that, set
Like a mini
aside
clinic.
certain hours, just like a mini clinic sort of, provider or something, and I think when we go through these negotiations, I think, we certainly can entertain anything. And I think the biggest thing right now is just understanding that, going through all of this, we tasked you and your organization and at the time, Mr. Hensley, because of his vast experience in going through this with, what are we looking at? We were able to establish that, this contract was void and what did we do? And that was why we went through this, conversation with Cerner and came to an agreement with them that we went, sure that we were going to have a 60-day period of time where we were going to look at these numbers and figure out if we could come to some kind of an agreement. And that's where we are today. And then, like you said, you're running sort of a parallel course in that to prepare for all scenarios, I guess. You were looking at options and alternatives, and I know that that's a lot of extra work. But if what we're looking at is, their numbers at 200 and, I don't know where the pages are.
240.
And that's kind of where we are, so we have to decide.
And where I stand, it's difficult to make a decision on which course to go when the parallel course hasn't had time to come to fruition. I'd like to see spelled out plans before making a determination.
Point of order.
Yes.
Because we have two separate items on the
Okay.
agenda.
Sorry.
So I think we're still under 5, unless you're done taking questions, then we can move into, at your discretion, we'll move into 6.
No, we're under 6.
Oh, sorry, 6 and 7.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'll put my glasses on again.
We're still under the update on
Update.
independent. So this is a no-vote FYI update.
Okay.
And then as far as the other contracts that you're looking at, you'll just be bringing those updates as they're provided and.
That's correct, Madam Chair. So we'll finish those negotiations on getting those through the legal review, any issues that we need to get with the vendors, and then bring them back for approval as well.
And I appreciate that you also provided us a copy of the December end-to-end review that you did, because I think that helps us to kind of see both, where we started with the first end-to-end, and then this kind of helps us to kind of tie together. Did you have a question, Mrs.
Just a clarification, so the unfunded actuarial present value of benefits for the retirees, 11 million, but you believe that's undervalued because it was based on GASB 40, or understated because it was GASB 45? Because I thought we were at 14, somewhere between 14 and 18 million.
Well, Madam Chair, what we're looking at is we think that's understated for 2 reasons. One is we believe that the premium basis that was used, we think, okay, was understated, right? So that becomes a significant portion of the multiplier based on the guru pot that the actuaries do. Secondly, the requirements have become more strict under GASB 75. So the combination of those two, we're guessing, back of a napkin.
Okay.
We were thinking it probably would have been between 14 and 18 million.
Okay.
I'll defer to Shunning, but that was our eyeball look at it.
But we'll know more in
Soon.
a few weeks.
Coming weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
We know that that's in process with
Okay.
Mike Marion and Mike Shunning.
M&M?
Lots of M&Ms. Mike Murray, Mike Shunning, and Mike Hensley in here. The 3 M's.
Any other questions from the public or from the board? So item 7 is discussion and possible action regarding Cerner management contract. Do I have a motion to discuss Possible action regarding Cerner contract? Second.
Second.
Call for vote.
Okay, oh, you need to vote, I'm sorry.
Oh, are we voting on like yes clinic, no clinic?
No.
Or just
No,
I
we're
make
just
just
discussing. We're just discussing
Okay, I'm
right
making
now.
sure what I'm voting for.
Just to discuss.
I'm sorry, did you want me to do a roll? Last time you didn't do one, so I was just making sure. Doctor?
We need to, this is just discussion, unless you want to make a motion to approve it or
We're
not
going
to
to
approve
vote
it.
to discuss and then we're going to take a vote.
So yes on the roll call vote or no? Smart. Dr. Atasi?
Yes.
Amy Barney?
Yes.
Hal Christensen?
Yes.
Marcia Cox?
Yes.
Julie Sessi? Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so Madam Chair and trustees, so as was talked about here, just to encapsulate and bring it back to where we are. So once we contacted Cerner and through with the attorneys had come to the conclusion the contract's void, we were then given direction to go back to Cerner and try and negotiate a change in the compensation to essentially close the delta between that $130 average cost of community and the $244 figure. So we have had negotiations with Cerner. For the record, I'm going to speak in somewhat broad terms because the negotiations occurred under the terms of a non-disclosure agreement between the two, so we are somewhat limited in what we can say. In essence, we said to Cerner, would you give us a revised quote for what the services are? They did so, and that revised quote came back in and essentially was based on a reduction in staff and a reduction in the number of hours that the clinic would operate, which obviously impacts the number of visits that can be accomplished. The discussion, the significant portion of that discussion, I think really reflects what the challenge is, that the Cerner model is based not on, if you will, an efficient cost per visit or an affordable cost per visit, but it's a primary care model that actually advocates for that longer sit-down time, and that's a decision that organizations have to make on their financial ability to pay and philosophically where they fall. So that extension ends on the last day of August. So we have essentially a 60-day extension. That's actually a 60-day contract. And the assumption under that contract is that if we don't come to terms, that the clinic would close on December 31st. So as indicated earlier, on Friday we got Cerner's costs in. We had sent the information to the actuary in that parallel world to start the repricing. Now that we have the Cerner clinic, we can actually finish that. But as of today, we don't have any of the pricing. So the only thing we know today is how much, what we've got budgeted and how much of that 472 we could get rid of if the Cerner contract and all the operating expenses of the clinic went away. And we know that leaves us with about $213,000. We don't know how we would distribute that $213,000 to restructure the benefit plan to a more traditional option, which was not built around the clinic. Our best estimate is that it will take us an additional 2 weeks to get those back from the actuary to build the structure before we could bring them to the trust. The obvious problem becomes 2 weeks from now that contract extension is going to be gone. Okay, so we essentially have two things that can happen right now. One of them is we can just say, hey, look, work with the actuary, do the calculations. For lack of a better term, we'll take a flyer and we'll say we're going to hope that there's enough money in there that we can redistribute and improve the benefits and just let the thing close. Or second, we could go back to Cerner and request an extension through, say, September 30th. So ask them if they're willing to extend the contract for an extra 30 days so that we can get the actuarial figures back on what those options are and come back before the trust. So I believe we have a meeting set for September 6th. If you were to go for that second option, we would target having that information back and doing what will be a fairly, I would imagine, would be a fairly lengthy work session and action item on September 6th so that the trustees can price through those two options. So in essence, I believe what your choices are is just go and say they've given us their best and final, we'll take the shot that it works out, or go back and have the actuary finish the calculations and come back on September 6th and actually take a look. So if you were to do that, we can't do that extension, so what would have to happen is you would have to direct the attorney to see if Cerner was willing to do that, and then finally, you would have to have a fallback, because it's possible Cerner would just say no. So I think if you're going to do an extension, I think that extension would have to consider what happens if Cerner says no. Are you prepared to then just say, okay, then we're going to shut it on 12/31? I'd be happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair.
Right. So where we are right now is we are in, for all intents and purposes, a 60-day contract that ends on August 30th or 31st, that says that we're going to look at these numbers. They've given us their numbers. They gave those to us on Friday. And if those numbers didn't agree with us, then we know that we've got this 120-day wind-down period. We don't have the hard numbers on what we presented here on, the different variations of co-pays and deductibles and whatnot that we could replace this plan with. And we really do need to have those numbers. We need to know what the premiums are if we're going to be able to present that to all of the employees, and so everyone has a good idea and understanding of what that's going to look like. And in order to try and have all of that information so that we can present it in a relatively intelligent way, I guess. The question is, do we go back to Cerner and say, we need another 30 days to kind of look at this?
It's my opinion, my own opinion, that Cerner has been dishonest with us in the past. They have not treated us properly. We've asked for things all along the road. They put roadblocks up. It only was because of this loophole that we found that made them even come to the table. They weren't going to do anything with us. They didn't care about us. In my opinion, there is no reason, even if the money was equal, for us to continue doing business with these people. We need to take things under our own control and not be at the mercy of them giving us what they think we should have and we should have. And that's just my opinion.
And I absolutely respect that opinion. I also want to take into account the staff who have been using this and rely on it, and let them have a vision of what their plan would look like before we cut the only thing they've known for the last several years. So, may I make my motion now?
I think
I still have questions.
We still have some questions.
Madam Chair, I can appreciate the fact that staff has a vested interest, but I would appreciate it if all of the trustees would appreciate the fact that we've been working for 2 years to get these answers that we still don't have. And the whole purpose is to reduce the cost for staff, to reduce the cost out of pocket, the cost of premiums, and get a better product, because we don't have that great of a product outside of the clinic, being able to go into the clinic. But that's a very small portion of some people's health care is the clinic. So I just hope that the trust understands that we don't get buy-in from the whole entire staff before you make your decisions. You have a fiduciary responsibility to make the decisions based on the information you have, not on the feelings of staff.
Right. No, and I think I can appreciate that. Being a new trustee, I want to see the whole picture before I make a decision. So, and I think that's part of why we want the 30-day extension. I don't think any of us
I don't think you'll get it.
Probably not, and I think we're prepared to then term the contract if that's what they do. So. Okay. We just wanted to get the full picture, if we can, before we make a decision.
Sure.
So
I understand that, but not getting buy-in from staff. I just wanted to make that clear that that's the wrong, that is not, I hope that the trustees understand that's not your job.
And Nicole, I do very much understand our job is to provide the best possible package. I just don't think I can vote on the best possible package without seeing the package.
I agree. Yeah. I think Marcia stated that too, and as well as Mrs. Sassine.
Well, and at the end of the day, even if we extend this, out for 30 days, whether they say yes or no, we're going to look at these numbers, and if we still have to agree with the numbers. And if the numbers are right now, we're at a $472,000 deficit, that we have to make up somehow, and the only offer that's on the table right now is that they want to cut the staff by half and reduce the hours by 20%. I mean, unless there's some miracle that comes between now and 30 days that they're going to, I mean, I don't know what the, what the change would be, but.
I think the point is that it's going to allow ECA to crunch the numbers, so we'll have some more accurate information. And again, I agree that if you ask Cerner for another 30 days and they say no, say, well, in that case, then 12/31/18, we're going to close the clinic. And I think that needs to be clear for them, but that'll afford us the opportunity to get the numbers from ECA, like Amy said, and be able to make a more informed decision.
One thing I want to make sure, though, that everybody understands is that I do believe that ECA needs to continue to make sure that you do calculate those numbers for those rates, for the deductibles and copays and whatnot, because we need those premiums. We need to be able to have a comparison.
Absolutely.
And I think that you've been doing that parallel calculation now, and I think we need to have that information. And unfortunately, I think we had tentatively tried to get a 13th September meeting, and that wasn't going to work. So the 6th, and you think that you can get that information? It's after the September or the August 30th date, but which is, that's the end of it.
Madam Chair, just for the record, I think it's worth restating. This is my thing. That's going to be a tight one, but we can hit it. Okay, so we can hit that based on what we know today. If it moves on to, if the clinic goes, we'll negotiate the terms, right? So it'll be, hopefully we'll negotiate more favorable terms for the operation. If the clinic goes away, then there will be a huge push between the date that decision is made and December 31st for all the reasons that I indicated before, the open enrollment, renegotiating reinsurance. There's a whole series of things. I just want to impress upon everybody, it's not just flipping a switch. It's either way we go, there's going to be a complex process between now and December 31st to get whichever decision is made done.
Right.
I just want to set the expectations at a real level because there's a lot there. Those are big processes.
And I do appreciate that, and I hope people that are, going to watch this, or people that you talk to, or anybody else that's here that talks about this, is that I can say, for myself, and I think that the other trustees, and Amy and Julie, because you're new, I think that you're committed to this, but I know, the history of ECA, and I know that a lot of time goes into this, but, this trust is committed to making sure that the benefit structure that we put in place is sound and it's fiscally responsible, and that we can provide something that we can, that's going to stay stable, and that we can actuarially, support it, and that we know that all of the changes that have been made up until this point and found all of the problems and all of the issues and all of the deficiencies and just all of the things that have happened over the last 2.5 years have been significantly different than what it was like before. And so I just feel like, we have made great strides. We're going to continue to do that. But at the end of the day, this trust has got to be fiscally sound. And that's what we're going to be. Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, Mr. Collins, question for you, sir. Is the trust physically sound today, in your estimation?
Madam Chair, I believe it is today. I think it is today. I think it's got a limited shelf life.
Okay.
Because, and the reason I say that is that balance is it's a cash balance.
Correct.
Okay? So that cash balance is reasonable. It has not been reduced by the IDNP incurred. We don't know that figure yet. And it is sound today because of the dollars that were transferred in ostensibly to cover the retiree liabilities, that combination. So I think it's viable today. With the deficit that's built in there, and that's a projection, okay? But I would say that within 18 months it will not be on the current trajectory.
So without a change at some level in the benefit structure of the trust, is it your estimation that the trust is not going to be viable in 18 months?
I would say without a change in the benefits, in the overall structure, or if the district came up with a magic pot of money and was able to infuse it. Because basically it's a financial issue. The rate structure is not adequate to support the current benefits. So you either got to increase the rates, get the cash in, or you got to cut the operating costs.
You got to cut the burn rate.
Correct.
And it's not the burn rate for a year, it's the burn rate moving forward, period.
Correct. So today, I'm very comfortable that today the trust could withstand anything within the normal range of a series of large cases coming through. I think there's enough cash to do it, but it's not, you can't replenish it.
Right.
Based on the current funding.
So a follow-up question as well. What are we currently spending annually total on the Cerner contract? Is it the 689 or is it the 1.2 figure I hear?
Because of the non-disclosure agreement, I don't know that I can give you that figure exactly, but I gave you a budget figure for the two operating in the presentation.
Okay.
So I can tell you what we're budgeting.
Does that operating figure include claims costs?
It does not. So we're assuming, the figures that I presented there do not include claims costs. So we're assuming that in whatever mechanism they transfer, that dollar for dollar, the claim dollars that are being spent in the clinic, transfer over.
So in a reasonably constructed plan, the ability of an employee to seek medical care should not necessarily change based on whether or not we have the claim.
I think it will change. And it will change because the clinic structure is set up differently. So how the care is provided. On one hand, it will be for pure face-to-face visits. I think the absence of the clinic would do two things. One, there's an immediacy to it that because it's limited to Havasu Trust, I say that's lost. Okay, and it's only partially offset by and improved upon by offering the teledoc. Okay, because on the clinic, you get immediate access to a person one-on-one. On a teledoc, but it's limited hours, okay, and it's limited service. On the teledoc, you get 24/7, 365 to a higher level provider, physician for different scope of services. So it's not going to wash. You cannot replace that clinic model because of the way it's set up.
Right.
Okay, and then finally, we know there's a primary care physician shortage in Havasu.
Is there perhaps something that this board could explore in the plan at the urgent care level, cross contract with one of the?
And I think teledoc's it's a different approach to structuring the issue. Where I think if this works, if where we're going works, where I think employees will benefit to a broader scope, is that because we're disconnecting it from the clinic model, our intent is to use those dollars to lower copay to a broader range of service providers, higher level and more specialized care that they're able to get through the clinic. Not a reflection, a negative reflection on the clinic, it's a reflection on the model. Correct. And the staffing. So there's not a clean answer. It's not going to be an apples-to-apples comparison, but I believe overall that if you change the out-of-pocket costs for employees using some of those dollars that are redirected, I think you can benefit a bigger portion of the population than is happening today.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from them?
One last question. So based on this bank balance, and I know you said that we are good cash-wise for the moment, barring any catastrophes, but do you think that the district would continue to have to plug every ounce of extra money that we would otherwise use for our employees into this clinic to sustain it if it were to stay open for the employees? Because the model is wrong. I mean, the structure is focused on this primary care model that doesn't reduce the out-of-pocket for the employees.
Like the 301 you mean?
301, Prop 123, every time we have extra money, it feels like it's going into the trust instead of somewhere where other places that we need it, and we're not getting better outcomes on all the, diseases that they originally established in the beginning. I'm just concerned because it's been 2 years and now all of a sudden I hear we've got non-disclosures. We can't really talk about the numbers we've been asking for 2 years, and I'm wondering, I feel like I'm in the twilight zone. So I don't know if that was a question that you can answer.
Yeah, honestly, Madam Chair, Nicole, I don't know that I can. Because I don't know the district's finances.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so that's the part that's missing. What I would say is there's a projected funding gap of $472,000.
But that's only because we've dumped 2.77 million into it over the past 2 years.
Well, that's the current rate. That doesn't,
Right.
that's in addition to.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Well, what you stated earlier is we're either going to have to put more money in or we're going to have to reduce the cost.
Correct.
So the question that she's asking is then would we need to continue to put more money in?
yeah, if you don't, okay, that I can answer.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So,
Thank you.
so you got a $472,000. If you don't change something, okay, either on the clinic side or somewhere else on the benefit side, you cannot continue to run with that projected deficit. Okay, recognize that's a target, it's an estimate, right? It can be materially lower, it can be materially higher, but there's no way to continue running a structural deficit at that level and maintain a financially viable trust. Those two are incompatible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me circle back around to something though that, that you said, Nicole, that I do think that we can still ask for, because we've asked for it. I can count at least 3 meetings that we've asked for it, and that is we did ask for and were told that we would receive statistical data for the health outcomes on 4 disease states, and that had nothing to do with pricing or anything. And so I do believe that we should ask for that because it was something that we were asked beginning in, well, the 2 that I remember specifically were April and September of last year. And that was never provided. I think that the last time actually was April, September, and November, December-ish.
Well, it was 2016, right before the end of the year was the first time I
That was the first time, so there's your 4 times. So that information had nothing to do with anything that was protected by ADAs, in my opinion. So I think that that's still, because I can remember looking at, you know, in fact, I was looking at the September presentation today, and we were asking for those, and they promised, I mean, we have that in several meetings that, you know, those 4 disease states were going to be, just, you know, discussed.
Yeah, will you catch me up on the 4
Diabetes,
Hypertension, obesity,
and cholesterol, something.
hypercholesterolemia. High cholesterol, yeah.
It didn't just say high cholesterol.
So that didn't have anything to do, that didn't have anything to do with anything that we're doing here.
Okay.
So I do think that that is, and that was promised, and that was in multiple meetings. So I do think that we should ask for it.
So, Madam Chair, to bring it around, if I could, I think from our perspective, the issue before the trust is essentially twofold. Do you want to either go with canceling the contract as of December 31st and then doing the actuary's numbers? Alternatively, do you want to authorize the attorney to request a 30-day extension, so September 30th, while we work with the actuary to get those projections? Right? And then the sidebar to that is if it's declined, with the understanding, if Cerner declines to do that, that it's understood the clinic would close December 31st. And then we would target, regardless, we would target the September 6th meeting to have the actuary's projected costs back so you can go through the benefit options that we've had priced to decide how to restructure. So it's kind of a 3-part thing. Do you want to just go for 12/31 close? Do you want to go for a 30-day extension with the understanding that if it doesn't go, then we go for 12/31 close? I think that's where we're at.
Right. And the understanding of the 30 days would be that we're just waiting to get our numbers, our actuarial numbers, because really, and for all intents and purposes, extending our agreement with Cerner to look is really just giving us time to get our numbers.
Right.
That's
Our
correct.
premium.
Because we
It
don't
has
want
absolutely no effect on whether or not we're going to,
we
It
don't want
literally comes down to September 6th is after the current expiration. The closest date we can hit to crunch anything, if we're going to crunch it, is going to be that September 6th meeting.
right.
because we want the full picture before we make that final decision.
Presuming that Cerner is willing to give the
Exactly.
extension.
And if they don't, then we're finished anyway.
You asked him too, in that, if they're willing to extend it, we had talked about, they had said they were going to close Saturday. So can you ask them if they could possibly adjust their Monday through Friday hours, or possibly go to a Tuesday through Saturday scenario?
My only concern with doing that, I understand why you're asking it, but my only concern with doing that is if they feel like we're going to be doing this give and take thing.
I think this, we're asking for a 30-day extension for our own purposes, but just so they understand, it's like, if you give us 30 days, but, you know, if you don't, we're going to close 12/31, and even if you give us a 30-day extension, we still may close 12/31, right?
Understood.
Right.
Okay.
So I can make my motion now?
Yes.
So, yep.
Yes.
Make a motion to direct council to extend negotiating session with Cerner for 30 days with the understanding that if Cerner disagrees, the contract is void and closes 12/31.
Second.
Gotta find the right piece of paper. Okay.
Motion Amy, second Julie.
I got that part. That part I got. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Atassi.
Yes.
Amy Barney.
Yes.
Hal Christensen.
Yes.
Marcia Cox.
No.
And Julie Sessi.
Yes.
So motion passes by majority vote.
Okay, item 8 is future agenda items. Does anyone have any future agenda items that they would like to add?
So tentatively, September 6th, is that set, or is that, because I had written down the 13th.
You did,
So-
so did I. And I had asked Jamie to check with Naomi to see if this room was available. So if there, I guess if there's another room that we could use for a work session that would be available to the public, that would be the thing that we would need to make sure, then we could have it somewhere else. Otherwise, we were looking at the 6th. We were looking at September 13th to have a meeting as a work session, but this room wasn't available, I guess.
Correct.
So,
I can check to see if the Warning Center at the hospital is available. It's quite a large room.
is that be an issue?
Is that an issue?
I think
It'd probably be an
we
issue
should
for the
yeah, it needs
staff,
to be on
or for the
district.
teachers,
Yeah.
whoever wants to attend.
Recording,
Look for the
Video.
recording.
Yeah.
microphone.
Never mind, never
Yeah.
mind.
Thank you for the offer.
You're welcome.
Would you have dinner there too and stuff?
I could.
I know.
Point of clarification, just that motion presumed 12/31/2018.
2018.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, not like your PowerPoint.
Now, but thank you.
So, I don't know if there is another room that we could use that would be big enough for
The little theater, but I don't know.
a work session.
It's big. We have staff meetings there at the high school.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. Or the library at the high school is a nice facility, actually.
Can they record there?
We record staff meetings, so I know at the little theater you can.
I'll just add to the 6th, I can work with the 6th.
I can do the same.
I can do this, unless I get jury
Is that,
duty.
would it, having an extra week, does that help you guys out more? I know you said you're gonna be pretty, or the gun to meet the 6th.
Extra weeks always better, but we can hit either one. So,
Okay,
The 6th will give us an extra week
She's going to check.
schedule all the other meetings
so
if we have to.
Yeah.
you can call my wife and tell her we can't leave till after the 6th now?
I'll talk to Linda.
Okay, you talk to Linda.
Madam Chair, I think Jamie's checking the calendar to see what's actually going on in this room.
Oh, not you, Jamie.
Not you, Jamie. The other
Jamie Festa.
To see what's actually going, maybe whatever's in here could actually.
HR Director. Yes.
While we're waiting, I suggest.
Is it a training? Is it what kind of meeting is it?
It's already 7:30. There are not going to be many staff members who decide, oh, well, before I go to bed tonight, I'm going to, because it's not even going to be posted yet tonight.
But they have conference
And
rooms.
I don't want all these rumors all over the district tomorrow, people hearing things, and it just gets worse and worse when that happens. It would be wonderful if somebody could write a simple statement about the liabilities of the trust, and that because of the cost of Cerner, that the EBT board has moved to give Cerner time to bring its costs down of the clinic visits, and Cerner's not able to do it within 30 days. The clinic will end as of December 31st. Just something really, really simple so that they know it's related to your fiduciary responsibility and keeping the trust viable. And just something simple. That's just my suggestion.
Well, here's one thing that I would really appreciate, and I would kind of throw this out there to everybody in the room, is that anybody that's in this room that is has access to any, Facebook postings or whatever, please don't let those rumors start, because we are a trust board that is responsible for making sure that we're doing the best job for the district, and we have a responsibility. But one rumor like that will destroy our opportunity to go through this in a professional manner and make sure. So we just don't need that.
That's why.
And so I think that right now, I think what we do need to do is just to make sure that everybody in this room needs to understand that we're in this process, and we've been working very, very hard to get this done. Cerner has made it very clear that they are not. They came back with numbers that, basically they cut their half in staff, or they cut their staff in half, and they reduced their number of hours, by 20%. So that doesn't really look to me like, we're talking real seriously.
But I think the way to stop those rumors, we have an easy way through email, staff email, get an email out.
It's just a brief synopsis.
And Kathy, I absolutely agree. We appreciate as a staff when we get direct communication from high above immediately, and we don't hear it through the rumblings.
Wow.
Madam Chair, I can produce something like that and run it past council tomorrow morning, if you would like.
I didn't know what you said.
Aaron, Diana didn't.
Did you say you would read something?
It would have to be, because of the NDA, it would have to be cleared through council, but we could bang something out that would summarize that, what happened tonight.
I guess I'm a little bit. I guess I'm kind of feeling like I'm getting my back put up against the wall by a comment or request like that, and I feel a little bit. I think there's a lot of people that if they were interested, so first thing, we made the decision to make these meetings at 5 o'clock because we have this higher rumbling and objection to nobody being able to come to these open meetings now because they were during school time, and we have like 4 people here.
They all work in this building too.
And so, and this is the second time.
I'm just trying to keep another walkout or something.
Well, don't post anything on.
Well, we're not talking about changing anything right now. Mr. Madison?
Mr. Collins, quick thought. Could an observer in this room, not sitting on this body, post a summary of what they saw happen in this room in regards to the Wellness Center, and say an all-staff Facebook page?
just think that staff
Absolutely.
email would be.
Absolutely, the issue, the concern is accuracy,
Sure.
but
Sure.
absolutely, you can't prohibit anybody from posting on social media.
So if Kathy were a part of the staff closed off email page, she could do it.
But my advice is email, staff email. It's enclosed, doesn't have any chance of getting out
But
of
if
Facebook.
if it comes from an official email account position in the district, you're going to have to run it to council.
Oh,
Which
I
we
see.
can, which
I
we
see
can
what-
do, but I actually agree, is that knowledge is power, and if you don't head it off at the pass and put what really happened out there, then the rumor mill is going to
So
get
why don't we
crazy,
do
so.
this? Why don't we send out, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, why don't you just send out an email?
To watch the
asking
video.
everybody to watch the video,
Yeah.
because the way I see it is, these weren't even allowed to be public meetings before. We've gone out of our way to work to make them public, to make them recorded, and it's still not a good enough option that we have to worry about rumors, so we're gonna rely on one person
I would rather-
to make a synopsis of 2
Yeah.
years in a paragraph.
I would rather that we, if anything, we send out an email, and I guess, we can ask council, but I'd rather that, if we're gonna send any kind of an email, it be that we notify everyone that the meeting was held, you can let us know, I don't know when it'll be available, but it'll be available at X time, and, we encourage everyone to, review the agenda and to watch the video, because then the entire truth of the meeting is available in its entirety. And that way, there's absolutely there's no, inference or anything, and because I, for one, would not want to be responsible for either putting in or taking out something that would be accurate or inaccurate, and there's an awful lot of information that we've covered in here, and I just really think that this video, and that's one of the reasons why we've done this. We went 30 years without any open meetings. I'm not about to be the one that paraphrases this meeting. This was too important of a meeting, and we have 4 people here.
Yeah, I actually think that's a very reasonable request, is to send it out, watch the video. Yeah.
Could, Jamie, I don't know, is it Sean who posts them? Could you give him a heads up and ask him if he could get it posted
Or Jamie.
tonight?
Which one?
Jamie. We got M&Ms and JJ's.
I don't know about posting it tonight.
No, it'll be tomorrow.
Yeah, yes,
It's been right away.
I'm the only one that works at 3 o'clock in the morning.
No, you're not.
No,
Yeah, sorry.
there's some cars in the high school.
Well, and I just think that that's reasonable, and I do
too, Marcia. We had a conversation and we got it worked out. And I'm sorry, my intent was certainly not to put your back up against the wall. I'm kind of horrified that you felt that way.
Well, I'm sure you are horrified, Kathy, and I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I think that this is a really good solution. And I think that if you're going to tell anybody about the solution, please be accurate and just let them know that they can watch the video and that we'll put something out, and I can do it, or however you think that should be done. I'm happy to do it as the chair, and I just don't know how to do it, everyone. I don't know if you can you do it? Yeah, just
As soon as I get the information about when the video.
I don't have an everyone access. I get them. But, I think that that's a good idea, and I think that everybody can watch that, and I think that would be a good thing for everybody to do. So, do we have any other questions or any other future agenda items that we want to add?
What did we decide on our date?
I think the 6th. Was everybody good with the 6th? Dr. Tassi? And then there was one item that we did include in the presentation about doing the EBT and ECA doing the presentation for the school board.
Correct.
And so I would still like to keep that on our schedule. And so do we need to do a formal request to Superintendent Sider?
Whatever date you gave us, I know we have it in our calendar.
Okay. But I think that if we need to do a request, I just want to make sure that we go through the proper process for that. I think it's, 18th? 18th?
September 18th is the regular amendment board meeting.
And so do we need to submit a request by email or just?
Make sure, I'm pretty sure we have it on there, but I'll
Ask
double check on them.
Okay. And so I don't know if that requires all of us to be there or you, or, I mean, I'll certainly be there, but you guys can come if you want.
I think we'll have to work through that, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll work through that, okay, good.
Yeah, I think what'll happen is once we know where we're going on the 6th, and I think that'll be clear.
And the real purpose of that is just because it's taken us 2.5, 3 years-ish. I think that was your first meeting. When we started all that, was just, it's a culmination of, just kind of going through all this whole process. I know, you're the veteran. I can't figure out who's the newest newbie, because I don't remember who got voted in.
Probably Julie, because she missed the last meeting. So
Yeah,
we'll call her
yeah,
the meeting.
yeah, you get to take out trash.
Vacations, I know.
But just, I think it's a courtesy, and I just think it's the right thing to do, is just to present to the school board, what we've done so far and where we are, and just the things that we've been able to accomplish. And I just think it's good.
Because even prior to us, Madam Chair, you guys covered a lot of turf even before we got on. So.
Okay. Anything else from you guys?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned at